Hello, BookTube. I'm just carrying on now with shelf number 12B, the second half of the shelf, and it got too long, so I'll be uh, putting these up. I'll be posting these sort of the same day, but just give it an hour or so in between the two. Um, but anyway, we continue on with the science fiction film. A sense of wonderful century. It's doesn't actually sound right, but uh, yeah, it's not a mistake. Anyway, it's explorations of science fiction and fantasy films by Gary Westphal, by Borgo Press, which I loved that press, but they were bought out by Wildside. Wild Wildside. Oh God, my COVID brain is not doing that well. Yeah, Wildside Press. And this was published in 2012. It's a collection of, it's explorations of science fiction and fantasy films. It is actually a collection of his reviews and other essays that he's written over time on various films. And he starts out, flights of fantasy, space films before 1950. What is an animated movie? Coming of age in Fantasyland, the self-parenting child in Walt Disney's animated films. The true frontier, confronting and avoiding the realities of space in American science fiction films. Dark Side of the Moon, Robert A. Heinlein's Project Moonbase. And he's an academic, but it just says here, I'll just read what it says here. The book gathers together many of the illuminating essays on science fiction and fantasy film penned by a major critic in the SF field. The pieces are roughly organized in a chronological order of when the movies and the television programs being discussed first appeared, with essays providing more general overviews clustered near the beginning and the end of the volume to provide the overall aura of a historical survey. Now, this is a collection of essays again, but this is an interesting series of books that Limelight Editions have done. This is the Science Fiction Reader, edited by Greg Rickman. Now, as I say, they do a number of these. They've got horror, westerns, comedy, gangster films. I have a number of them. I don't have them all. I'd love to get them all. And you'll see why in a moment, because as many of you realize that I like essays. Now, the biggest one that they've got is, I think it's 4 volumes. I think it's 4 volumes of film noir. But let's get back to science fiction. And this it's a historical survey of essays on the subject, whichever the subject happens to be. And this is science fiction. So you got Foundations. So we got Trick Effects, written by Georges Méliès in 1907. And then an H.G. Wells review from 1927. Louis Brunel writing about Metropolis in 1927. And Borges writing about Wells in 1936. And then we go into different subjects like Adventures in Outer Space. And, it goes from like a review or a discussion of The Woman in the Moon by Fritz Lang. It's not written by Fritz Lang, but the movie is. But this essay, A. Krasna Kraus in 1929 to 2004 essay. Then we got Tom Weaver, which we'll see coming up in a bit. Then we've got Vincent DeFate, Blake Lucas. Those are all sort of newer ones. We got Susan Sontag essay. Jay Hoberman, which we have seen already, I believe. Let's see here. Arthur C. Clarke writing on 2001. Did I say? Oh, I think in the last film I said 2010, but anyway, it should have been 2001 when I was speaking about the book. But oh well. Arthur C. Clarke, 1969, Alien Encounters, Science Fiction in the Mysterium in 2001. Sort of more recent ones. And then Anthony Burgess writing about Clockwork Orange. Jonathan Rosenbaum writing about AI, artificial intelligence. And then we got some essays about Star Wars, next E.T. Well, yeah, I still keep the book even so. And then it's about cyborgs. We got an essay by Joe Dante. Yeah, it's just it's a wonderful overview of essays, like historically, sort of through what people thought of this. And as I say, I would love to get more volumes of these if they would do them. And now we go into a sort of an assessment of H.G. Wells in movies by Keith Williams. This is H.G. Wells' Modernity in the Movies. See, this is with my film section, but it could easily go up with the books here about H.G. Wells, which I think are right there. So yeah, so I'll have to see, like, when I get some space or need space, I might shift stuff around so I don't need to look in different places. But I originally put these with the science fiction because it frees up a shelf in a bit. Well, science fiction and horror. It frees up more than a shelf in my film section, film collection bookcases. Now, this is, as I say, by Keith Williams. Published by Liverpool University Press. It's again one of these Liverpool science fiction texts and studies, edited by David Seed. This was published in 2007, and it's just, it's an assessment of the early writings, the time machine, and short stories, like about the James Whales, the Invisible Man, and Sleeper Awakes and Fritz Lang's Metropolis, all sorts of sort of comparisons to other films and a critical assessment, more or less, of Wells on film, which is kind of cool. Now we've got the Illustrated History of Horror and Science Fiction Films, the Classic Era, 1895 to 1967. Carlos Claren's New Introduction by J. Hoberman, which we've already seen an essay by him. And this is a reprint by DeCapo Press. This was reprinted in 1997, originally published in 1967. And it is, just it goes through the films, like The Wizard of Montreal, Paris, 1895 to 1913. Doubles, Demons, and the Devil himself, Germany, 1913 to 1932. Silence, Conspiracy of Terror, America, 1900 to 1928. Then Hollywood, 28 to 47. The Dead Next Door, Horror, The Soul of the Plot. Keep Watching the Sky. See, it brings in, like, even though it says it's horror, but there's cosmic horror, which could be technically science fiction as well. And then it gives the filmography, cast and credits of the films that were discussed in the text. Now we're back to one of these film readers, and this is the horror film reader, and this is from I shouldn't even have tried that to try to think of the name of the film. It's one of the few ghost films that I really like, with Claire Bloom, and it's from anyway, sorry. Other people will find it. Sorry, I do apologize. I maybe should have waited to do some of these videos, because my brain is not geared that well at the moment. But hopefully we'll get through it, and you'll forgive me for this. But anyway, the horror film reader, edited by Alan Silver and James Orsini. Let's see here. Published in 2000. And again, it goes through with older material from 1952, Ghosts and Ghoulies and Ghosts. William K. Everson, 1954 essay. Terence Fisher, 1964. Yeah, and then newer ones here as well. So it's a great. These are really, really, really good readers, as you know, collections of essays by Limelight Editions. Now here's a book that probably shouldn't be here, but we'll see. I'll leave it for the moment. It's London After Midnight, an English translation of the 1929 French novelization of the lost Lon Chaney film, edited with preface and afterward by Thomas Mann, translation of Lucien Boisson's novel Londres après Minuet by Kieran O'Driscoll. This is Bear Manor Press. It's a print on demand. As you can see, crappily made, but it's a little better than most. It's or at least the binding, because it's done by Lightning Source rather than Amazon. But the reproduction pictures are crap. They just look like photocopies. But this is, as it says, it is the novelization translated of the film, which is a holy grail of horror films by Lon Chaney. But yeah, it just it's got a bit of critical material in it, discovery of the novel and so forth. But yeah, this is quite cool. Now, staying with horror and silent is the horror in silent films, the filmography 1896 to 1929 by Roy Kennard. We've already seen him with the Serials book. Now this is McFarland, published in 1995. And this is a really bad reprint. Like if I thought the pictures in the Bear Manor book was bad, this is even worse. Even though it doesn't say that it's a print on demand, but I wonder. But it's an interesting book. It's very brief on each film, but it does list every film that is considered horror. And now there's a bit of an essay at the beginning describing the selection of the material. But it's just, yeah, it gives what there is known about it. Sometimes there's hardly anything, and a lot of the films don't exist anymore. But they do give the cast and crew and a sentence occasionally of what the movie was about. But for instance, yeah, some just very, very brief, and some not even any description of what they're about, because they don't exist anymore, and I guess he couldn't find out information. This was published in 1995 by McFarland Press. Now, this is a pretty good one. This sort of is kind of a, well, it's a chronological history, but it's written as a narrative, chronological narrative, I guess you would say. After Dracula, 1930s, the 1930s horror film by Alison Price. This is IB Taurus Press, and it was published in 2013. And it is more or less it's chronological, but it's thematic as well. Like it's a little bit of both, but like he's remembering horror in The Mummy, Stubborn Beast Flesh, The Panther Woman, and The Island of Lost Souls, White Zombie, and the emergence of zombie cinema. Just like more or less essays, but But there is a chronological aspect to this, if I remember rightly. But yeah, it's a fun one to read. Now, these two are kind of neat, and this kind of sets up the format of a number of ones to follow. This is the chronology of classic horror films in the 1930s, and then he went on to Donald C. Willis, went on to write chronology of classic horror films in the 40s. Now, he goes through every film year by year, as you can see, introduction, 1940, 41, blah, 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 all the way through. And he gives a brief description of the the film itself. He gives the filmography of it, the director, the actors, and he goes into and he gives some production material, or at least a description of some production aspects, the director, any other sort of sometimes biographical details of the characters, or the actors and the directors, cinematography, and so forth, and then gives a critical assessment of the films itself. These were published by an interesting publisher, Midnight Marquee, and volume 1 was published, or 1930s volume was published in 2019. Midnight Marquee Press, that's what it's called. And the 1940s was published in 2022. I don't know if he's done a 1950s volume yet, but I can see that coming. But anyway, yeah, these are quite, they're fun. They're very useful to sort of refresh memory, or when I go to rewatch a film that I've seen or have on Blu-ray, I will refresh my memory with this, as well as a couple other books here, depending on which film it is. Now we've got a small volume on the monster movies of Universal Studios, James L. Niebuhr. Rowan and Littlefield. It's Taylor and Francis again. And I forget who owns who. Roman and Littlefields owns Taylor and Francis, or Taylor Francis owns Roman and Littlefield. This is 2017, and it goes through film by film, as you can see, all the Universal horrors, and it does give, as I say, again, like we go, Dracula 1931, a little box with the all the cast and credits in there. And then a little history of it, like he goes into the F.W. Murnau, Nosferatu, and then he goes into the production, Universal buying the rights, and casting as well, and other production material through it. And then he gives, he talks about how it fits into the history. It sometimes, not all the time, but into the history of horror films, as well as a critical assessment of the film under discussion. And as I say, this is the same format that a lot of these books take, and I don't even have a fraction of books that do deal with the subject matter, but this is a really good one. This is Universal Horrors, the studio's classic films 1931 to 1946, and that is from Dark Old House, Bela Lugosi, and I forget her name off the top of my head. Gloria Stewart, colorized, obviously. And it's the same material, the same format, but it's by Tom Weaver, Michael Brunis, and John Brunis. And it's McFarlane and Company. Uh, Farling Company. This is the second edition of it, 2007. And obviously, the frontispiece is Boris again, but as the Frankenstein's monster. And it goes year by year, all the Universal films. And again, it goes through, well, even does the Dracula Spanish version, gives the filmography, description, a critical assessment, biographical information about the actors, the production, and so forth. Whatever, like it's that format. It's the same format. But they specifically put, like, critics corner, what they critically think of the book. But this is really good. I don't think there's a newer edition of this yet, but there might well be. This one is a really good one. And the authors have done others, I think 30s and then 20s, or at least a couple of the authors. And that is 1940s Universal Monsters, a critical commentary. And it's a hefty one. It's over 700 pages. It's Bear Manor Media, so it does mean that it's print on demand. They are a more professional publisher, so it does look better, but the formatting of it. But sometimes, as I say, the pictures are really, really bad at times. This one, I think, is pretty good. The reproduction in this one is pretty good, but it's got the cased binding that is just not nice. But again, it goes through. It's by John T. Soyster, Henry Nicola, Harry H. Long, and Dario Lavia. Bear Manor, 2021. And this was one of the few books that I sort of had unpacked when I first moved in, and I was watching some videos and just reading through and just loving these essays. As I say, they do the same thing, but this is a little more in depth than the other ones. They're anywhere from 5 to even 20 pages for the book. I mean, for the film under discussion. It gives, all the actors, the filmography of it, goes into the directors, the production, a biographical aspect of the director or the actors, and he doesn't repeat himself in each one. He refers back to say, there's more material about this director actor in this essay. And it's each of these authors have decided to write, they divvied up, I should say, the books, the films under writing. Actually, no, the filmography material is actually at the end. I just realized that here. They switch that around a little bit, like The Invisible Man Returns. They give the cast, and then they give all the credits for it here. But they do go through the critical aspect of it and all the other details. This is just a wonderful book if you get a chance to get it. If you're interested in Universal and 1940s horror films. See, the problem is, like, I love the format of this, but it's only Universal films. There's other films that I love as well. I'd love to get like this type of material and decade by decade, 20s, and do the exact same thing, but all the films, all of them, and not just specific to studios, but there's going to be a lot of secondary and third-rate films as well, but they're still interesting. At least I find them interesting. Anyway, that ends shelf 12, 12B, and we'll continue on with 13. Thank you, BookTube.